I've been asked to give a declaration for conflicts of interest. There's going to be a form coming out, just a simple form that we'll fill out, but basically it's if there is any item on the agenda that could be considered as a conflict of interest for any planning commissioner or alternate, then we would ask that they excuse themselves or recuse themselves from participating in the discussion and or vote. So we'll be making that announcement, I think, at every meeting. Jill said that there's going to be something forward coming out in regards to that, but just as an FYI. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. We haven't a lot, but I'll ask for a motion at this time that we approve the agenda as so outlined.
Motion to approve the agenda as outlined.
Thank you. In a second.
I'll go
I'll
ahead
second
and
it.
second that.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, that was going to be a short meeting for a second.
Yeah, so little pun intended there, huh, for a second? Gotcha. Right, so we only have one item, and it's a legislative, and it's discussion for used car lots. We discussed this 2 weeks ago, and the possible allowance into a CP1 and or restrictions. So Jill, I think you've got this put together for us.
So,
Dino, you made it.
yeah, we made it. Okay, we have everybody. Okay. So I did send out the staff report. I really wanted to just have a discussion to see what exactly you guys want to see as restrictions for a car lot, if that's what you want in the CP1. If you want it in the CP1, if you don't, just have a good discussion on that. And I did supply some examples of used car lots or car lots within the Weber Davis County area. And I did add the codes for those. So if you notice in the very back, there's Ogden's. I couldn't find their website, and their codes are extremely difficult to look through. So, I mean, Ogden has quite a bit, but Roy, North Ogden, West Haven, Layton, all have used car lots. And if you notice the West Havens, the JCP Auto Sales, it doesn't look very nice, and I think that's what a lot of people are worried about, no matter where we put one. But if you notice in the staff report, they don't have any restrictions, they don't have any guidelines, they don't have much of anything. With Clinton, they actually have their restrictions or regulations through the business license, not necessarily the zoning department. So I really kind of wanted to see what your guys' thoughts are. Do you guys want to see it in the CP1? CP1 is for the neighborhood commercials. If you do, what type of regulations? If you do, I would suggest, if you haven't read the staff report, how many cars do you want to see available? There's some codes for as examples that I believe it is Layton or Clinton. They only are allowed so many out in the parking lot. The rest have to be in storage. There can only be so many percentage of the car to be rusted. It has to be able to run, things like that. That's some things that you want to look at. And just to remind you, we actually do have a used car lot in Pleasant View that is going in. We approved the sign, Czar Kelly's. If you remember, that was the animated sign down on 89.
Right.
So what exactly do you guys want to see? Do you
So-
want it in CP1? Do you not?
Will you give me the date of that email that you sent?
Which
With
one?
with the staff report?
It was Tuesday. I can resend it right now.
No, I should have it, but I sure can't find it. You skipped me. You said everything to me.
Well, of course, I'm gonna say I don't want the lights brighter than 3,000 Kelvin. So let's keep the lights less than 3,000 Kelvin. And we talked about at the last meeting that we want the cars to be less than 12 at all time. We prefer 10, but he was saying 11 or 12 maybe. But so I think 12 is okay, but I really don't want any more than that ever. This is just me. I also, the thing that I notice about car lots, like especially like small car lots, a lot of times you see a lot of weeds coming up through the concrete. I would really like it if it could be possible, if we could put it specified that there has to be some kind of minimized landscaping on the outer perimeter of the parking lot. And I know that they have to, the people that pass by the parking lot have to be able to see the cars, and the cars sit low to the ground, but I don't want the weeds. There can't, I don't, Pleasant View is such a beautiful little place, and I don't want those nasty asphalt weeds coming up, because that's usually what a used car lot brings, and I don't want that. That is like huge for me. So that's my input on that. That's what I have so far.
Okay. Well, you guys
And I don't want, I really kind of don't want to like open the door to the CP2 zoning. I kind of would like to keep our Shaw Market area at that CP1. I don't really want to do the zone change. That's my opinion on that.
that's something that you want to think about as well. If you look, Keith, I did send that to you again.
I got it. I have it. You did not.
See,
I don't think you sent it to me the first time. You could have. I get so much crap. I think some of those to my spam.
Really quick, if you look in the staff report, Straw Market is not the only place that has CP1, just so you know. So I'm gonna hold it up. You have the Straw Market right here. You have the corner here, and this is within like the main part of the residential areas. You have some CP1 close to 89 and 2700. So keep in mind, if you want used car lots to be within the CP1, you're also allowing them in those areas.
I think before we're talking about specifics, what we would want or not want, maybe we need to back up and really determine if that is the right location and the right time for a used car lot there. I mean, if it is, then it's worth exploring all of those things that you would want or not want. But if it's not the right place for one at all, then no sense even exploring the other, right?
So a good, I did put some good pictures of some used car lots. They're big, but like the landscaping, for example, Alicia, that you brought up. There are some that have really good landscaping. There's some that really doesn't. One thing that you'll want to make sure is looking at that, is that something that you want to see in those CP1 areas, not just the one by Straw Market, as a whole. And if that is where, you know, you could see a used car lot, you're going to have to look at the big picture of how many cars do you want in an area like that? Not necessarily just the one here by Straw Market, just as a whole, because once you put those regulations, it would hit every single one that would come through.
It doesn't necessarily mean that every single one of those places would all of a sudden get a used car lot. It just means that it's possible one day someone might want to put one in there, but it doesn't mean that all of a sudden they would all have them.
No, but it's saying every single one
Is allowed. That's true.
for it, it will be allowed. So that
That's
would be something that to keep in mind if,
Yes, ideally, when it was presented, used car lot, no. Do I want one there? No. But when Dean was saying, do we want to have tax on a taco or tax on a car? Like that made a lot of sense to me. And I was just like, tax on a car. Now, does it make sense to have the car lot down on 2700? Yeah, that's pretty much what 2700's for. But I kind of was like, this guy has that property and he's like really knowledgeable on this. And I don't know. So it's kind of like, that's kind of
to kind of back up, you're not doing this for one person, because if one person comes,
I know.
he's a great person, which is awesome, fantastic. Let's say if he sells it and someone else comes in and does something.
Right. So that's why I figure if we're super specific to what that person's like super awesome and fantastically willing to do, then we'll force the next people to be awesomely and fantastic and force them to be awesome and fantastic. But that's, I don't know. And that's like what we're here to decide, if we're capable of doing that and if that's what we want to do. Like, that's all.
Well, Jill, some of the paperwork that you offered had pretty interesting sections. And one was a market analysis. And that would answer a lot of questions about all these CP1s having car lots. I sure doubt it. That would be awfully competitive for a small geographical area. But the market analysis talked about the feasibility, the acceptability to the residents. And I don't know where that would fit in, but it seems that that's a thing that we're missing.
Jill, can you confirm, is there a sidewalk in front of the Straw Market currently? It appears there is.
Yes.
Yes and no, like kind of slopes and then it kind of picks up again. I don't know.
Straw Market, yes. In the front of the dirt, no.
It stops. I'm double checking, but I'm pretty sure it just stops.
So I'm looking at the photo. It actually looks like there's kind of a buffer, like a landscape area in 3 different locations in that vacant lot. Am I looking at the right? Hold on, let me back up. I'm sorry, I was looking farther to the east. Let me get where I need to be. Okay.
There's more driveway than anything else.
It looks like, see if I can get a clearer view. There is sidewalk actually.
Yeah, it looks like sidewalk, and it
Yeah,
looks like
it-
3 landscape planters, right?
It looks like, here, let me see if I can do a screenshot. Really, well, I'll just share my screen.
Let's say I could share mine as well. But I can see 3 landscape areas. Looks like a sidewalk, and then concrete, and then 3 areas for beautification, which,
So here's the park,
there
here's,
you go. Yep,
and there's the sidewalk that goes all the way across.
Yep.
And then crosswalk.
and then you see the landscape buffers, right? The 3 areas. Do we
Yeah.
know if there's currently water to those? I would imagine there is, but I don't know that.
I would have to pull the plans or even. I'd have to talk to Pineview as well to see, because we won't allow culinary to be used as secondary.
Well, I like what Alicia, her concern about frontage. This looks like that will address that frontage. Even if it's a rockscape, right? Put boulders and something that requires less water if there's not currently water there. But that would make it a frontage for commercial property, in my opinion. I do have the concern about cars just sitting on 900 West and what that means, what that'll look like. If they're nice cars and they move, that's quick. If they're junkers, then it kind of becomes a junky area. And we have to keep that in mind. I know that the applicant will not let that happen, but if in 5 years or 10 years he moves and another person comes in, it might happen. So Sarah's here with us tonight, and I asked a question to her last week. When Nick asked a very viable question, what does a person do when he builds a piece or when he buys a piece of commercial property? What can he put on that property that is profitable to him? In other words, how does he get a return on investment? What would Pleasant View City want to see there if it's not what the applicant is applying for? What could he put there that would be profitable to him and advantageous and beneficial to the city?
Dairy Queen.
I am all for a Dairy Queen. Nick, if you're watching, go for it, dude. But seriously, when he asked that question, I gave it a lot of thought, and he's got a valid point.
Well, when you look though, neighborhood commercial, I'm looking at the general plan and it calls for the property to be neighborhood commercial. And then it kind of spells out what is expected there. It's typically smaller scale and less intensive commercial, and that they will blend into the existing residential uses that they are surrounded by, and that they will be compatible with the neighborhood. You know, that general plan was created, my understanding, with citizen input saying this is what we want our neighborhood community or what we want neighborhood commercial to be. If we change that with our vision, is that really fair to the citizens who helped create the general plan? Now, in a couple of years, the general plan gets revised or we have new citizen input. But I'm a little concerned that there have been 3 citizens who have already spoken out and said, no, this isn't what we visualize as neighborhood commercial. When I think of neighborhood commercial, I think more along the line of barbershops, hair salons, maybe a little strip office area that's got insurance, salespeople. We've got a bank down there, or not a bank. What is that? A realtor. But you know, there's different office look. Anyway, I'm just saying I'm a little concerned that we are taking what the citizens have given and the vision and maybe going really a different direction.
And for the clarification on the 3 residents, I found it off the residential page of Pleasant View. No one has called, no one is saying why they don't like it. No one said anything, is they just don't want it. So just so you're aware, that's what it is. But I had to go find it, no one's calling.
Well, here's another concern that I have, and Julie, I appreciate what you're saying, but so during the winter, when we have some hellacious snowfalls like we've had this year, and the snow gets thrown from 900 West onto that frontage, how does that now become a parking or a sales lot for used cars when there's 2 or 3 feet of snow in between each car? There's no asphalt to maintain it, and so it's just always kind of an ice snow liability. I do worry about that. So it'd be the homeowner or the property owner's responsibility to remove the snow. But if there's no asphalt underneath it, I think that would be very difficult. I don't know if road base would work. So that's one of my concerns. I mean, if we're gonna allow some kind of commercial operation along 900 West, I'd like to see at least blacktop on all of the proposed areas, at least.
Yeah.
Keith,
Yes.
if I may, I've had a couple of comments here. There are from on the YouTube page. It looks like Heidi Cutler is watching. I don't know if this is Nick or Heidi that's responding, but it says Heidi Cutler. The first comment is there is sidewalk along the front. All of the park strips have recently been upgraded with pavers and a new mailbox. The next comment is would love to, I guess that's with regard to the Dairy Queen, would love to have a Dairy Queen. And would anyone want to invest? And then next comment is we have had neighbors reach out to us in support of the used car lot. The Wilcoxes across the street called me the day after our last meeting in support. And then finally, the last comment was, we will definitely have it plowed regularly.
So the question is, do you
You say it's both of them. Hey, guys.
do you see that a used car lot would be beneficial to CP1? If yes, then let's dive in to see what you guys want and restrictions or whatnot. If you don't feel that it's comfortable for a CP1, then let's not do it then.
Hey, can I chime in here a little bit?
Please, Andy.
I've thought about it over the last week. A few comments. I appreciate the staff deck that they sent out. I have driven by a lot of those different car lots that you have sent, and some of those in West Haven and in Roy are looking much nicer, but I drive by those myself over the last 10 years, etc. And it has taken almost 10 years before those are looking almost bearable because over the last 10 years, some of those have looked like dumps and are now looking almost like bearable car lots. So they've taken a lot of years before they've become to look like presentable. So overnight, they will not look great, or we can't hold them to it unless we do put some meat to the requirements.
Yeah.
It's hard to say this CP1 or this C1 is good, this one isn't. So I'm a little bit reluctant to turn it loose and say all CP or C1s, because that's part of the reason when it was started that we left C1s neighborhood commercial, C2s would have the other, because it does open it up to anywhere else, does allow that. And so I'm a little reluctant to saying, let's go ahead and change it to allow it into that area. And there again, the last thing is the citizens did not want to have that. And that's why it would be to stick with leaving into the C2 areas. And that's what the general plan was. You know, as much as we would like to have that, you know, I had a citizen say, you know, 30 some odd years ago or 40 years ago, they tried to have a car lot there and it didn't work back then. Now things change, and it would be much nicer if we did go the way that if we chose to do that. I would then want to vote like Keith and say, if we're going to do it, we do it all or none, and they've got to have the asphalt. We've got to do it all or none. But, you know, I would tend to lean towards, you know, let's leave C1 separate from everything else. Otherwise, we're going to have all these pocket little things that we're trying to make exceptions.
I think one thing that would influence the quality of the appearance would be mitigation that might be imposed by the folks who are managing it. You get different players and you can get completely different results. And I know that in the past, when we've had 3 negative comments, and the developer claims that he's also gotten some positive feedback, makes me think back to the cell tower initiative when we introduced that. I remember one fellow in particular came up to the mic and indicated that his grandchildren would suffer so much trauma they would need counseling for the remainder of their lives. And the bottom line is FCC, that cell tower is going in whether you like it or not. But I'm not sure we have a representative reaction from the community with just 3 folks here and 3 folks there.
I did see another comment from a certain council member that has had people reach out to her expressing that they do not want to see a car lot in the neighborhood commercial.
Can I ask,
Can I
looking
ask
at the
one thing
aerial-
about staff? Real quick, because Keith, you posed the question
okay,
that you asked. They reached out to you to ask what they could do with their property, but I go back to the same statement, and I guess I could pose to staff is, it is not the responsibility of this commission to determine what they do with their property. They chose to purchase that property knowing what it was zoned. It is not our responsibility to determine what they do with their property. They determine ahead of time if they want to make that investment, knowing what it's zoned for and the risk if they want to go through the determination to try to make a change. Is that correct?
You are correct.
that would be a correct statement. Looking at the straw market and the Century 21 next to it, what is all the junk behind it?
That is owned by Gary Hunt, I believe. Let me hurry and double
No
check.
relation.
Is
And
there, I mean, if you can take a look at that, and if you pictured that might happen in the future along 900, that would be a disaster. That would be the absolute worst thing that could happen to our city.
Mhm.
You
And
know,
if we're not enforcing it now with those junky cars and crap, and I think that's got to be an ordinance issue, Jill, I would think. No? Why?
It's behind a building. I have no way to get on the property to take pictures to verify. I have to go on someone else's property. And he does have road base down, and that's what they're parked on.
What, and even farther south, what is that lot?
Same deal.
Same guy?
Well, it's the same deal. I think it's a different owner, but it's not for lack of desire to enforce. Staff finds our hands tied regularly with these kinds of things. And it's tough because my father-in-law, for example, owns 100 cars, 40 of which are in various stages of degrading into the ground. And, 60 of which are awesome showcase worthy cars that you would be proud to have in your driveway. He's a project guy, and he loves working on them and bringing them back to life. And so one man's junk is another man's treasure, kind of a thing. So it's hard to say, and if I had some of those cars, I don't know where I would put them. If I had a property, I might be tempted to put up a fence and put them behind that as well. So
But Bill, let me ask a question. If that appearance was along 900, then is there an enforceable code?
in residential areas, it's a little easier to enforce. But if it's, again, if it's behind a solid side obscuring fence, like a vinyl fence or something where you didn't have to see it when you were walking by and things, it would be a little bit better or easier, but it still has to be on an improved surface. But gravel, road base, concrete, asphalt, any of those things work in that case.
But there again, if we put this into a CP1 and 10 years from now, the area west of the Straw Market looks like the area south of Century 21, is that now enforceable because it fronts a major arterial street?
If it's
Then it would be.
right next to the road, I can see it. We could probably do it with, depending on what the problem is, but if you guys decide to do it with a CP1, that's why we would have to make those restrictions, those things, so that way we can enforce it easier because it's part of the zone process. My opinion, and again, this is just my opinion, no matter if you put it in a CP1 or a CP2, if anything is conditional, that is your opportunity to put conditions there before people come in and put these types of commercials in. That's what the conditional use is for. That's why we should be writing down those conditions and having them in the books before it happens.
My concern about changing the zoning, say we changed it to CP2 to facilitate a car lot. And then they get into it and they look at the pavement is too expensive. The landscaping too expensive, the lighting, whatever, and look at it and say, well, that's not feasible. We've now changed the zoning in a residential neighborhood to allow anything that's CP2 to go in there that might really be objectionable to a neighborhood commercial area.
That's
So,
what I think Jill is saying, we need to be very specific as
no
to what is allowed. And not just what is allowed, but what is not allowed.
and it's not necessarily for his project, it's car lots in general. It's anything in general that you guys have down as a conditional use. That's an opportunity. So the question that we really want to look at is car lots in general, not just Nick's, not just a certain area in general. If that's something that you want to see in the CP1 or the CP2 and just leave it in CP2. If so, what are the types of restrictions you want to put on the car lot?
Okay, I get it. I'm still trying to think in my mind, what else could be there that would be a profitable venture for the applicant?
We have a whole list of CP1 that they could
Right.
look through. I don't know if it would be beneficial. I don't know how much they paid, but that's what's allowed in that zone.
Right, so the question was asked a couple of times, what does the city anticipate going into that area? We have guidance from both the future land use map and the current zoning ordinance that tells us what the city would like to see go in that area. And I think Julie is exactly right when she says that that's not something that we should take lightly or deviate from easily or with haste. It's something that does reflect the will of the people as adopted by the Planning Commission and the City Council. And that is our guiding document. And if a small used car lot fits in with that, what's anticipated and what was hoped for and planned for as determined by you guys and the City Council, then great. But if not, if you look at the guidance that comes from that and it seems to say, don't put a used car lot here, then we should adhere to that as well. And that's a determination that is being asked right now is, does a used car lot fit in this area based on the information we have, based on the guidance that we've received?
So my question, I guess, is more, if we're gonna have any kind of an entertainment to change the zoning, do we have to hold a public hearing? Do all the residents need to be notified? Has that happened?
No.
This is just a discussion. It's not a decision. It's discussion on what you guys think, what you guys want. If you want to entertain something, then the next meeting we have, we can easily do that. This is just as a discussion, a free discussion of what you guys want to do.
Let's say the majority of the planning commission want to see something, we want to change the zoning. That still has to be posted by all the residents, correct?
That's right.
And then our recommendation is to the city council. They have the
Correct.
final say.
And they would have their own separate public hearing, which would be noticed separately. So there would be plenty of opportunities for residents to have a bite of that particular apple.
You bet.
And if we decide not, then there's always the appeal process where the applicant can just go right straight to the city council, correct?
Correct.
But the city council cannot take action unless and until the planning commission makes a recommendation.
Sure.
There was a new law that was passed just this past session that says that if the planning commission doesn't take action within a reasonable period of time, then it's considered a negative recommendation and goes to the city council as such. So
When does that clock start, Bill?
it doesn't say in the code, so I couldn't be specific. It's probably something that we should either amend our ordinance and or our bylaws as a planning commission on that, just so that we get that codified. I'd say 2 meetings worth though. We can't make a decision on the first meeting and then we have another, it gets tabled and then, unless there's some technical review or staff is trying to run something down or some bit of information, you'd probably say 2 meetings.
So I really like the work that Jill's done. Thank you very much, Jill. Your homework is very valuable.
She's awesome.
Learning.
And I'm hoping that in 2 weeks, maybe we can meet together. I don't know what the guidelines are looking like for reopening the city. It's hard to have these kind of discussions where you can't look at each other in the eye and share documents and, you know what I'm saying? Is
Very
it
well.
possible within 2 weeks? Or we don't know?
We don't know just yet, but I don't see why we wouldn't. We could maybe spread out some of the room just a little bit more, some of the chairs, and if everybody wore a mask or something, I don't know. I'm just spitballing. I'd have to talk to the mayor about it and see how he wants to handle it.
And one thing I've tried to change with the notices, just so you guys are aware, is to try and get as much information out there. And I've actually encouraged people to email me, and I put my email on the notices. I put phone numbers, anything to encourage people to actually make any type of comment. Any comment, I would be more than happy to take, but I still haven't heard anything.
Okay. All right, well, I think I'm just going to say what I think. I think we take this item and we shelve it for 2 weeks. We all think about it. We go out and we look at the properties that Jill has given us. We drive up and down Pleasant View Drive, 900 West. We look at what's there, pickleball courts and parking and all of the various things that are existing. And then we use our imagination. What do we want to see on this very what's the word I'm looking for? Desirable corner. It really is. I mean, 900 West and Pleasant View Drive that's a pretty valuable corner. So we want to be fair to any applications that come forward, but we want to make sure that we do our diligence in making sure that our recommendations is for the benefit of the city.
Keith, I saw a property today that kind of fit what they're trying to do. It's in North Ogden. So as you drive on Washington Boulevard, take a look. You know where Artistic Hair is on the corner?
Yes.
And then right to the north, it used to be a t-shirt shop. Do you remember the old t-shirt shop there? Anyway, they've turned it into a used car lot, just a small one, probably about what we're looking at. And it's kind of squozen in there between, commercial, residential at the back of it. But in looking at it today, I thought that was a pretty fair representation of kind of a similar area. Obviously, that part of North Ogden is much busier, but it is just a small one that's kind of there. It's worth taking a look when you're going up and down Washington Boulevard.
Did it fit, in your opinion? Did it fit?
No.
Where is it at again?
Artistic Hair. Okay, you've got 7-Eleven
Yes,
And you've got Artistic Hair
which is,
north. And then you've got an older building that at one time was a little cafe, and then they turned it into a t-shirt shop. And now it's been turned into a used car lot.
okay, yeah.
So it's almost across from, would it
It's
be
on the
like
east side of the road.
from
Yes.
Lee's? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But take a look at it when you're going up and down Washington, that corner. Now they've got other places along Washington Boulevard further south that have used car lots, and they, to my mind, they fit in fine. You know, it's down Washington Boulevard, it's more south, there's more commercial. Yeah, anyway, I don't know, just take a
So
look
you
at it.
brought up one thing that's been a concern to me. There are a lot of shops. I'm looking at the map right now, looking at Google, but there are a lot of shops along Washington Boulevard that have been one thing, and then they've been another thing, and then they've been another thing. And I get it. Whoever purchases the property wants to make a profit. And if this venture doesn't work, then let's try something else. And that's my concern. If
Well,
this
it
doesn't
should
work-
be, it should be remembered, Keith, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
it should
you're
be,
good.
it should be remembered that we're not doomed to repeat the mistakes of other communities. If we do decide to put this in our city, we will definitely make sure that it's robust enough and just nailed down and buttoned down enough that it will help mitigate some of the impacts on the neighborhood. This is the most restrictive zone that we have in the city, and it's that way for a reason. It was intended to blend in with neighborhoods and hopefully not detract or create too much attention or traffic or other negative impact on the existing fabric of the neighborhood. So we just, it's a cautionary tale, and you're right, absolutely right to look around at what other cities are doing, if only from the fact that we don't want to repeat their mistakes. We want to make our city stay awesome. And if we don't like what they're doing in North Ogden or West Haven or Far West or any of these other places, well, we're going to learn from them and not be doomed to make those same mistakes.
exactly. So the question is that you'll want to look at and think is if you want something like that in a CP1. And if you do, that's when you can look at other cities and say, I don't like that, so let's make that a restriction. Or I like that, let's put that there. So as you do drive around, see if that's something that you would like in that type of area.
I know that I don't want a car lot in my neighborhood either. Some of the ones that we've seen around, especially the bigger ones, there would be a terrible match for this area. But there are probably ways in our current environment with the online sales and things like that take place that a car lot is really just more of a location to go sign papers and pick up keys and maybe take it for a test drive kind of a thing, rather than you have a myriad of cars on display and you go and pick the red one because the blue one next to it didn't fit your fancy kind of a thing. So I understand everybody's hesitation, and I promise I get it because I feel the same way, but just let's be methodical about it. And if it can be done, let's at least give it the due that it's due.
If I recall from our last meeting, the applicant stated that certain parameters of quality have to be met in order for it to be profitable for him.
Right.
And I'm not saying that I'm necessarily in favor of having one there or not having one there, but that is a variable that can make a big difference in the quality of the management.
It's true.
Mhm.
I'm gonna pipe in. I'd like, we obviously need to address what we want there, what we want to see there, but the fact that that applicant is, he's already made that corner look better. And, whether it's a used car lot, whether it's another business, We want it to have that neighborhood feel, and we want to see somebody maintaining that property where that corner has been neglected for many years. It is a great corner, it's a great location, but it's also been an eyesore for a long time. And, you know, we have somebody that's in the community, that lives in the community, that wants to improve that location. We need to take that into consideration as well.
Thanks, Nate. I appreciate that. I think that's what we're really talking about. So I've heard from several of you. Is this something that we want to bring up at another meeting and make a determination? If we allow this CP1, what exactly do we put in for conditional use? What do we allow? What do we exclude? Because if we don't put it in up front, we're allowing it regardless.
That's the big caution.
So if we don't mitigate now, we might suffer later, right?
Well, and I always go back to Brent Bateman, if you remember from a couple of years back when he came out and said, when it comes to conditional use permits, they are permitted uses. So if you allow them, you're allowing them. And if you don't want it, if you don't think it reasonably can be mitigated, you just shouldn't allow it. That's all. Because if you do and you try to put conditions, there are always loopholes, there are always things, they'll find a way. And so if you don't think it can work, then don't allow it. But if you think it can work and there are conditions that can and should be placed, then you may want to allow it and just beef up the conditions to make sure that everything is spelled out exactly so that there's no, well, as little wiggle room as possible.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other comments in regards to this item? Are we okay with, I apologize to the applicant. We're now pushing it back a little bit farther, but
There's no comments on YouTube, so.
No additional comments, so that we've read all those in.
all right. So commissioners, can I ask Council Member Yuri a question? Sarah, please. I asked you 2 weeks ago, what would you put there or want to see there if you own the property? If you live next door to it, you've had 2 weeks to think. Have you come up with anything?
If I own the property or as an observer of the property and a resident that lives there?
Well, so let's say, what's the difference?
Well, if I own the property, I want to make as much money as possible. That's the bottom line. And I totally understand that. I know that they want to be good neighbors and the intent is there. But if you're going to invest in something, you want it to be profitable at all costs. That's the end of the story.
Sure.
And you're not going to want to lose money. So you're going to make it profitable no matter what. And again, intent is there. You want to be good neighbors and stuff, but bottom line, you've got to support your family and stuff. And so if I own the property, I would start out with trying to be a good neighbor, but if push came to shove, I would put what I could there to make a profit
So,
within the bounds of the law.
okay, but that's such a small parcel of ground. We're not
Mhm.
talking about the
So as an observer, as a resident in Pleasant View, is that,
Please.
now you want to know that?
please.
As an observer resident in Pleasant View, I would love to see Straw Market expand and, become a bigger store. You could have a farmer's market there. You could have a boutique there. You could have, some sort of recreational type of thing. I don't personally, it's a busy drive, but people use Pleasant View Drive to get to the freeway or to go down to 2700 or whatever else. There's been a lot of different things that in that area as far as that bank. The bank closed because people didn't use it.
Right.
Because America First built a bigger branch and then it became a dentist office. Terrible location for a dentist office because then all the other places. And now it's a preschool that works in a neighborhood commercial because moms and dads don't want to have to go down to a busy road and they can now, take their kids to the preschool. It's a nice little market that the kids after school go get their cinnamon rolls and they get their treats and have, breakfast is there. but I've lived in pretty much in the same 4-block radius for 40 years of my life. And Woody had a garage there. It was a 2-car garage, and there was the only other place was Barker Station down in North Ogden. When other places started becoming more available, it went bust,
Right.
and it was a junkyard for a long time. It's you think it's a good location, but only for certain things. It's in a neighborhood. People want a place to go get a treat. People want a place to,
How
you
about
know,
a
have a
small
little
restaurant?
cafe or shop. Grandma's Closet did great down the road because it was owned by people in the neighborhood, and it was a quick craft store and places, you know, I think things like that.
How
I
about,
suppose, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so how about a Rusty Spoon?
Sure.
Expand it larger, have a
Yeah.
small restaurant?
Food for Thought Cafe is where that new, that was my very first job when I was 15, right by Artistic Care. That was a great restaurant and it did extremely well and it was small. And it's not going to be, bottom line, it's not going to be as profitable as a used car lot because those are bigger ticket items and you're going to make more money. But if I'm going to add my 2 cents, and I will, we want to help our residents out, but I really don't feel like that's the job of city council or planning commission to make sure, and Brent Bateman brought this up again in training, it's not our job to make sure that they make the most money off of their purchase. It's just not our job. And if you feel like that's a great place, great, that, you know, but back it up as to why is that in the best interest of the residents of Pleasant View? Why is it in the best interest? And whatever you come up with, that should be your driving force. I would love to see them turn a profit. And if they can make a used car lot somehow, whatever, because I can, you know, with restrictions and whatever else, and if you guys feel it's best, then you should do what you need to do to pass it on to city council. But in my opinion, living a couple blocks away from that place right now, I would love to see a, you know, place, something where I could go buy something like, you know, food, a restaurant, a boutique, a farmer's market on Saturdays or something. But to be honest, those are not as profitable as car lots. If
Well,
that
they
car
could
lot
be.
did well,
I mean, they could be,
they could be.
like you're saying, a
could be.
boutique, a flower shop, a larger restaurant. We
Yeah.
don't have any eateries in Pleasant View at
No,
all.
and they've done a fabulous job at making Straw
Yeah.
Market much more appealing. I would love to see it expand and you know, PJ's Pizza that was right there next door where Century 21 was. I frequented that when I was a child. And so things like that fit in neighborhood commercial. There was a gas station there for years at Teddy Bears, that when it used to be Teddy Bears, until gas stations opened up other places and then it went bust. So again, take heed to what Bill said. If you want it there, you create it exactly how you want it. Exactly. And don't leave any room for something else to be decided. If that's what you want, you tell it exactly what you want and leave everything else out. And so that's just my 2 cents.
We did get another comment here from the Cutlers. We
Mhm.
understand that we won't get a lot of traffic. Our dealership would be mostly online, as Bill mentioned. So there, and you know, I don't know what the profitability of something like that is. It's been pointed out that the city's not in the business of ensuring people gain a profit from their investment. But if people do have an investment-backed expectation of return, they bought the property knowing what it was. And you know, that should remain at least that profitable for them. What we're exploring now is there some way that we can tweak things maybe to help accommodate their desires to have a used car lot? And if the answer is yes or no, I mean, we talked about that. So,
You know, one thing when you look at all of the used car lots, landscaping is usually somewhat of a minimum on smaller, well, any actually used car lot, because they don't like trees, because they don't want to attract the birds that are going to poop on the cars, right? So they don't want trees. They don't want anything high or trees or bushes that obstruct people being able to look over there at a vehicle. So a lot of times these smaller lots struggle in the look of them because they really having landscaping is not conducive to helping their cells. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I
And,
appreciate that.
and yet you look on Pleasant View Drive and that particular corner with the park there. And if we're just looking at a slab of asphalt with 12 cars parked, for a downtown, and I realize Pleasant View's downtown area is a little different than a lot of cities, but that Pleasant
have
View
one?
Drive area, no, yeah, we really don't.
Right
But
now,
that Pleasant View Drive area, I mean, you look at all of these pictures, what's missing in those pictures?
Bill, doesn't the 15% landscaping rule apply in this case?
Yeah, it would apply there too. So they would, and we could even make that more restrictive or different for car lots because, you know, like we're hearing, there are issues with having a car lot that are unique to a car lot. And so we would want to make those, or at least have a look at those. So
Yeah, I think that issue could be controlled pretty well.
a couple more comments come in on YouTube. We want the corner to be attractive to the city. These are from the Cutlers again. And it will remain a parking lot as it has been. Just want to look at a lot better than it has. Just want it to look a lot better than it has. So those are the comments there from the Cutlers.
Well, and I will say this for the applicant. As has been mentioned, Nick has worked with Carfax for many, many, many years. And so he knows the ins and outs, the pros, the cons. It's not like he's just trying to find something to do with a little piece of property. I think he's pretty well vested in what he would like to see there. And I appreciate that. My concern comes afterwards.
Right. And you're right to be concerned about that because as I mentioned, once you open the door, that door is opened. It's a permitted use. So.
Okay, can we, clearly, we're not gonna put pros and cons or adds and subtractions and all that right here, right now. So can we put this on the agenda for 2 weeks and really have a really in-depth conversation?
Yeah, and this is what I would ask in ahead of that, Jill, if you don't mind. If you have specific comments other than the ones that we've mentioned in the meeting tonight, because Jill will put the minutes together and we'll kind of get everybody's thoughts. But if you have specific thoughts, if you would email them to Jill and myself, we'll put them together and collate them and kind of put a spreadsheet together of what everybody's thoughts and concerns are. And hopefully that will inform the discussion. So we won't have to rehash where we've been and hopefully get out ahead of where we're going with this. And maybe a pattern will become more clear as we go forward. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind, just get thoughts, pros and cons, yays or nays. If we do this, then we should do that. If we don't do this, we should avoid that kind of thing. That would be very, very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Is there, well, that'll be one of the questions that I'll ask in an email, so we won't waste any more time. Is everybody okay if we go on that, follow that procedure? We'll bring this up again in 2 weeks and we'll have it hashed over and we'll, I think, be ready to make a recommendation, or at least really close to make a recommendation to approve or deny rezoning. Yes?
I like that idea.
Okay, Jim, you're yes. Nate, are you okay? Dean's good.
Yes.
thumbs up.
Nate's good. Julie? Good. Okay. Did I miss anyone? Allison? Did she leave?
Ashley,
Well, we had Allison as well.
Allison, who's Allison?
Allison.
That must be the other planning commission you're on.
We have an Allison. We have Ashley, right?
Ashley, she can hear. I'll email her again.
Okay.
She's just listening.
She's the one that's drawing, right? Her name is Allison, just
No.
for the record.
Her name is Ashley.
No, her name's Allison. Ask her. Ashley, jump in and share. Anyways. So we'll adjourn that part. Is there anything else? Just move on to other discussions.
That's something it sounds like.
What's that?
Andy?
Andy,
Do we have training?
what's that?
Do we have training?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're moving on. So Bill or
Yes.
commissioners?
Okay,
Yes,
let
we're
me
next.
share. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay. I've been looking forward to this for a while, so I appreciate the indulgence on this. Today, I want the discussion to go, let's see. Let me get back over to. We're going to look at some planning history and how we got where we are. And this is an interesting conversation in light of the conversation we just had, which was about how we got where we are and really where we're going. So I want to go back, and I want to go way back. So stay with me. And if you have popcorn or snacks, now would be a good time. I see Alicia's got some beverage there at least, so she's good.
Treats.
Pleasant View
Maybe have
City
something
is
healthy looking.
Pleasant View City is a beautiful place. I think we all can agree on that. I don't think there's anyone that has ever even looked at Pleasant View but thought that is an incredible place to be. It's a beautiful place to live and work, and I'm sure everybody has wanted to be a part of it. And it's great that we've been able to keep the character of community that we have. And really, that's what this whole thing is about. What we're about as a planning commission, what I'm about as a planner, and Jill as the planner. We're all in this to try to help figure out how to keep Pleasant View amazing. One of the things that we have, and it's been pointed out in the previous conversation, we have some tools that are the zoning map, which you see on the left, and the future land use map, which you see on the right. They don't match exactly, and they don't have to, but they should try to at least inform each other. And really, if there's a question about whether an ordinance is good or bad, we should think about what does the general plan have to say about it. So that, again, that earlier conversation was good along those lines. By the way, if anyone has any questions or comments, please jump in. This is what it looks like on a broad scale. I zoomed in here on the legend for each of these things to kind of highlight some of the differences there. When they put the colors to these things, they tried to match what was already there on the zoning so that they would kind of make sense. So you've got the A2, or I'm sorry, the A5 that's in the dark green, and that corresponds to the rural residential and the future land use map, which anticipates 1 unit per 5 acres and that kind of thing. One of the things I wanted to point out, and we're in the throes of working through our zoning ordinance, the commercial zoning ordinance. Look at the number of commercial zones that you see there. I counted earlier that we have 13 different commercial zoning districts. And if you were to buy a piece of property, let's say you bought the straw market, and you wanted to know what you could do on your property, it might be a little bit of a challenge to get in and try to find out exactly what applies and where and how. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking through that. But again, I wanted to go way back here. And this slide is appealing to me on many levels.
Wow, 375,000 years ago.
Yeah, it's 13.77 billion years is where we are from the beginning of the Big Bang until now. And I put this up there because A, I'm a geek, and I know that some of you would appreciate this, but B, it's all about organization. When the thing started, whenever and however it started, 13.77 billion years ago, everything was really hot and really small, and it has grown since then. It has become more and more organized since then. the gases coalesced into light producing stars, and we started revolving around the stars, and we evolved from animals. I just put this in here just because I thought it was cute as well. And we are up at the top of the tree there. But really, I'm pointing this out because as a civilization, we started out at the beginning. We started out when two people decided they wanted to live in proximity to each other. And when I say two people, I mean probably just a man and his wife. But really, it expands from there and goes to a man and his brother, or a man and his family and another family. And they decided that they would live together because there are certain benefits that come from living close together. However, there are also certain restrictions and problems that come out of living next to each other. And the whole history of civilization really depends on the balance of those two things. How do we get from two people who have different ideas about what they want to do, and how do we make sure that no one's rights get trampled on, and that everything works out for the best? And it goes back to the very idea of, hey, I've got this garbage, this, I don't know, this saber-toothed tiger bone. What do I do with it? Do I throw it over here onto my neighbor's property? Well, that's where he's trying to grow wheat or corn or whatever. Or do I throw it over here into the ravine? How do I, that poisons the water. What do I do with this? And then there had to be some sort of a consensus, and people work things out. We're going to fast forward here a little bit to the spread of that. And you can see on this map, this is another kind of a geek map, and how things kind of started in Africa, they presume. I don't know that anyone really knows, but the idea is that the civilization spread out across the globe, and it started in some place and it spread out from there. We're seeing the result of that. I just read an article earlier today in the Tribune that said that Vineyard is the fastest growing city in the country. Did you guys see that?
Mm-mm.
Anyway, check it out. It's interesting. Vineyard is a place where I grew up, in Orem, and we used to go fishing down there at Utah Lake. We didn't catch anything, probably that's probably a good thing. But we used to cut through Mr. Gammon's field down there and get out onto Utah Lake and go fishing for carp and catfish. Things are growing, things are spreading. We're dealing with that not only in Vineyard and in Utah in general, but in our city, we're seeing quite a bit of growth as well. So how do we handle that? How do we deal with that? Well, it all started back in Mesopotamia. It's the oldest civilization of which we have record. It's about 3,500 BC, so about 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. The city was called Ur. And if you look on the map there, I don't know how well you can see that, but in the lower right corner, just above the Persian Gulf, there's a little city. It's called Ur. And it looked like this. It wasn't a very big city. There's probably fewer people in Ur than in in Pleasant View right now. But if you look, they've got different districts that are laid out. There's a sacred district. They've done something with the water. They've built a wall for defense. It was located there because it was on a travel route between other different cities and the sea, so that people could get around without roads. It was an interesting experiment. It's obviously gone. There are ruins there. The ziggurat, which you see there in the middle, so a word I just love to say. I love to say the word ziggurat. The remains of that building are still there, and there are other ziggurats from the Mesopotamia period that are still around. I think Saddam Hussein tried to build one, but he was removed from power before he was able to finish.
What were ziggurats?
The ziggurat is right in the middle. If you look on the diagram there, there's a dark square in the middle, and above the word, right in the middle is the word temple, and above that there's the word ziggurat.
But what is a ziggurat? Was it like
It was a pyramid.
Oh, okay. That's what I wondered. Okay.
Which
Ziggurat
leads
is
into
a pyramid?
It was a pyramid. It was a kind of a stepped pyramid structure.
Huh, okay.
And if you look, I think the next slide, this is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. This ancient Jericho. And this is an artist's representation, obviously, of what that might have looked like. And you can see that one wall wasn't enough for them. They had to build another one around it. And they were dealing with how the city grew. Obviously, there are no walls around the city now, but this is how they think it looked like. But Jericho, this is that Jericho, as in Joshua marched on Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. This is that city. It's like I said, the oldest continuously occupied city in the world. And the reason why it was continued to be occupied was because, it was on a major trading route between some of these civilizations, but it also was an easily defensible position, and it was on a significant source of water, which is always a good thing in the middle of the desert. I'm going to fast forward again. We're going to jump ahead to this city. And I want you to look closely at this map. I don't know how well you can see that, but this is the city of Miletus. It's an ancient Greek city. This is where we see the first effort at real city planning as we know it today. This map dates to the 1800s, but the important thing to note about this is, what do you notice about how the streets are laid out?
It's a grid.
It is a grid, and there are distinct areas where you have a port area and you have a grid. You have up on the right, you have the theater, that little curvy black line there that you see kind of, well, maybe I can point. Can you see it if I point right in that?
Oh.
Right there. That's the theater. This city still is still there. And this grid pattern was laid out over 2,500 years ago, and it's still, these blocks and streets are still laid out just exactly the way they are. So I think that's pretty cool. The guy who did this, his name was Hippodamus, and I think that's another good word to say. Hippodamus. That's so far we've got Ziggurat and Hippodamus. We're not done yet. Because then came in the Romans, and the Romans expanded their empire greatly throughout the Mediterranean. In fact, the word Mediterranean Sea means the middle of the earth, and they thought that they were going to conquer the whole world, and that the Mediterranean would be their main big pond. And this what you see here, this map here down at the bottom, this is how they laid their cities out. You see there are two roads, and it's a grid pattern off of those two main roads. You have the Cardo and the Decumanus, and that's how they laid out their cities. And if you fast forward another 2,000 years to our day, this would be Main Street, and the east-west would be Center Street. So we're following the same kind of pattern. There's a reason why people thought this was an efficient pattern, and it has to do with traffic. As we lay out on a grid pattern, as we lay out on a grid system, we see that there are easier ways to get around from A to B, and if one way is blocked, there's an alternate way around. So, but the Romans were the first ones to really lay that out on a very strict north, south, east, west grid pattern like that. This is an interesting one of London. Now, London, if you know the history of London, it started out as an old Roman barracks and fort, and they took a mile square off of that. And actually, the city of London is really only that square mile that is still considered the city of London proper. The rest of the area around it is London, but it's not the actual city of London as it's officially called. This is an interesting map as well. This is the Thames River here on the right side, and it flows from, on this map, it flows from the bottom and moves up to the right. The old castle started out downriver, and there was a problem that they noticed as the city grew up around the castle, and that was that everybody was throwing their refuse and other sewer right into the river. Well, living downstream from all of that wasn't really the best thing in the world. So as the river became more and more polluted, they moved closer and closer, or further and further east. I'm sorry, further and further west or upstream. So the castle originally started on this end of the river, and then it progressed up, and then finally, I think the Houses of Parliament were built in this area just to the the west. And I think that's about as far west as they went. But eventually the royal family decided we got to get out of London. They moved even further west and upstream, so they didn't have to deal with all of the mess that was going on around in the cities. Because cities, for the most part, have been, throughout their history, have been very dirty places, disease-ridden, filthy, swampy, gross areas to live. And never did we see that more than when we got into the Industrial Revolution, where people's homes and their livelihoods and their children and everything was all just kind of mixed in together. And there was no recourse from the pollution. There was no escape from the ravages of the diseases that just ran rampant. Tuberculosis, I know, was rampant. Malaria was a problem. The bubonic and black plagues were awful. And it was these concentrations of people in these cities that led to their, it led to their reputation of being not awesome places to live. And so to combat that, we have in the late 1800s, a guy by the name of Ebenezer Howard, and he created this. I don't know if you guys have seen this before. This is the model for the Garden City. And he came up with this idea, and he was going to make, through rational, careful thinking of both technology and careful planning and land use, he was going to make everything healthy and green. In fact, if you can see along the top there, it says group of slumless, smokeless cities, which is a great goal, right? I mean, who wouldn't want that? This population, this area is 660,000 acres, or I'm sorry, 66,000 acres, and it's a total population of 250,000 people. And obviously this is not sustainable, but if you look carefully, he's got these little satellite cities around the edge where you've got beautiful places like Garden City and Gladstone, and what's this one over here? Utopia, or Justitia. Rurisville is down here. That's obviously the countryside. Philadelphia, Concord. These are all beautiful, poetic places to live, and who wouldn't want to live there, right? They've got a ring railway you see there, and one of the things I love, the other thing that connects these little outer cities is a municipal canal, because boats are definitely the way to get around in there. He's got this is my favorite one here. He's got farms here for epileptics, which I don't think that is quite politically correct, but this was 120, 130 years ago. There's homes for waifs. An insane asylum is right here, because you're going to have a lot of those. And yeah, anyway, this was his, again, this is a very rational, well thought out, planned out. We've thought about everything for everybody kind of a plan. And some of this actually made its way to the United States. There are several cities back east, especially, that were built off of this kind of plan. Now they weren't quite as laid out and as geometrical and rational that way. But when you look at this, you can almost see the golden mean in some of these triangles and areas. And you can kind of see the Vitruvian Man standing there, can't you, with his arms out and his, he's doing, it's Michelangelo. And again, that was intentional. They were going for that. They wanted to show that these guys were rational and they were going to be safe and make the city a great place to live. Again, 250,000 people. That's about the population of Salt Lake right now. So he was thinking big. Here were his three magnets, and he was saying these are why people want to go where they go. And some of these things I thought were just kind of funny, because they're so funny, but they're also what we look for today. If you look at the country up in here, these ideals are the same kinds of things that we're looking for in Pleasant View, right? We have the beauty of nature, but we also have a little bit of lack of society. And when he says society, he means things like educational opportunities and arts and entertainment kinds of things. But you do have bright sunshine, but there's no lack of amusement. I like that. No public spirit, whatever that means. need for reform, deserted villages. Anyway, they were going to do it. They were going to fix the world. So fast forward a decade, and these are full points. Full points for anyone who can guess what city this is? This is a city in Europe. I'll give you a hint. It's a capital city in Europe. I'll give you it's easier if you look at the island down there in the bottom. The dark gray area down in here is an island. You have bridges crossing the river. And so this in this area is a little river, or a little island rather, in the middle of a river.
So that's Venice.
No, this is in France.
So not Paris.
It is Paris.
It would have.
It is Paris.
Oh, it is Paris. I was gonna guess Paris a while back, but I was like, no way, that's too obvious.
It is Paris. But so this right here, this area is the Louvre. And
What
over
year
here-
is this, Bill?
say that again?
Wait, what year is this?
This came out, I want to say in the early 1900s, 1910-ish, 1910, between 1910 and 1920. And again, this was a vision of a man who was named Corbusier, Le Corbusier, and this never came to be, obviously, for very good reason and for the benefit of everybody. If you look here on the Ile-de-France, which is this island here, that's where the Notre Dame is, right over there in that corner. So you can see that this area. Now, one of the things that you get the impression of when you see things like that is that these people did not like cities. They did not like the hustle and bustle. They did not like, they didn't like it. So what they've done, if you look carefully, they have removed the city from these areas. These are completely clear. These huge roads that were just driven through the fabric of the city. This is, if you remember also from the previous slides, this is your Cardo and Decumanus. This is Roman planning. We're going to lay this out. It's going to be clean and clear. Look at these towers. We're going to stack people up here. It's an efficient use of the land. That's what they were concerned about, is the efficient use of the land, transportation in and around and through. And yeah, what's fascinating to me is that this happened, not in Paris, thank goodness, but
China.
well, this looks like China a lot, but actually this is New York.
I was going to say it looks like New York.
This is New York.
Because they've built a whole bunch of cities in China that they're not even using.
Yeah.
That
And
look like that. That are
so,
it's
yeah,
weird. Yeah, go on.
this is called the Radiant City. If you remember, this one was the Garden
Mhm.
City. This is the Radiant City. And it was all the rage back in the 40s and 50s and 60s to put these things up. Well, what's the problem with these places? You probably already know. They don't work, right? People hate them. Well, why? Why would you choose to live in a place that looks like this? It's a rabbit warren. It's roads going everywhere. It's crisscrossing and things just going everywhere. There's no order. If you say, meet me on Rue Plubet, who knows where that is? You got to give me directions, pal. I don't know where you're going. But this, oh, I live on the 14th floor of the building number 1527. You know exactly where you are. But people don't like this. It's cold and impersonal. They miss their neighborhood connections that they used to have. And they were shoved in here many times against their will. And these big plazas that you see down here at the bottom are never used, except they're not ever used. And so all of the grand experiment that they wanted to make the place freer and open and things like that, it just never got used. So it was a failure. In fact, there was one famous one in St. Louis called Pruitt-Igoe, and they built it at great expense. And then within 5 or 10 years, they dynamited the whole thing and pushed the whole thing down. So then about the same time frame, you have, again, these are people who are planners who are really trying to think about what can we do to make the city workable and beautiful and attractive and healthy and all of that stuff. And they came up with this. This is called the City Beautiful movement. On the left, you have two shots of Chicago, and they borrowed heavily from old Romanesque and Greek revival type movements. And this building that you see in the lower left, this one here, this still exists today. This is the Field Museum, and I believe that's the Shed Aquarium in the background there. Those are the only two buildings that were left from the Columbian Exposition of 1893. But they were gonna turn the city into something beautiful. They looked back to Rome and the glory days of what happened before, and they thought, boy, if we could just get back to that, that would be the ideal. These ones on the right, these are, anyone can tell where these are? It's a little easier.
Washington, DC.
That's right, that's DC. This is the mall, and the buildings that are laid off of the mall, you had monuments on either end. You have the Capitol, obviously, on the east end, and then you have the Lincoln Memorial on the west end. You have the Washington Monument right in the middle. On the north, it's off this page, but well, maybe it isn't. Is that the White House there? I think it's a little bit further off the page, but anyway. And then you have the Jefferson Memorial here on the south. And the idea was that they were going to create a place of beauty, a place that was rational and well laid out, and a place where people wanted to go and be, and it was healthy and bright and all of the things that other cities were not. But if you look closer, you'll see that there's the grid behind it in Washington, but they've also driven these grand boulevards through. This was, I want to say his name was L'Enfant, who did these, who laid out DC in the beginning, and he did a very good job doing that. And it was easy for him because these were not places that existed already. This was a place that, yeah, this was a place that he was able to design from the beginning. So one other thing, and this guy was homegrown. This movement was homegrown, so I include him. Plus, he's my favorite architect from this time period. So I love Frank Lloyd Wright. This is the Broadacre City movement, and his idea was, and it's hard to see maybe in these images, but his idea was to put people in a great big tower. He had UFOs to get people up and around and through. There really were, I don't know what these were, some kind of helicopter, I guess. This was in the 20s before really even any kind of flight took off. But the idea was that you live in these towers and these apartment complexes, and then that leaves the rest of the land open so that people can go farming and do their things on the ground, their recreation, and just have nature. But everybody, their residences were all combined into these residential apartment towers, and that left the land free for doing whatever else you needed to do. So one of the biggest proponents of this was a guy in New York City named Robert Moses. He's the one pictured there on the left, and you can see what he's standing in front of. This is a model of the city, and this is looking at Battery Park, and he's got a bridge that comes in from Brooklyn, a little bit further south than the actual Brooklyn Bridge, but this leads in to the middle of the city and goes right up to where the World Trade Center is, and on the lower east side, or west side rather, where Greenwich Village is and all of that. And he was going to push down all of these blighted neighborhoods that were so terrible and so awful, and clear them all out and push these roads through that were 280 feet wide, and just make New York over into his image based on the principles that were really put forward by Corbusier and the other modernists back in the early part of the 20th century. And it didn't happen, right? You guys know who this person on the right is? Alicia, you know who she is, come on.
Yeah, I'm having a brain leak right now, but I know who she is. I have her book. I studied her.
Her name's Jane Jacobs, and she was not a planner. She was just a resident down there.
She saved Greenwich Village.
She saved Greenwich Village from Robert Moses, and her efforts almost single-handedly. She put coalitions together and rallied the troops and got everybody out. But she was the proverbial little old lady, and I think she's still alive, or maybe she's died just in the last couple of years. But she said, you know what, these are our neighborhoods. These are our homes. And once they're gone, there is no getting them back.
Yeah.
And she was able to activate people enough that they pushed back on this. And Robert Moses, with all of his bureaucratic might and power, who never actually even drove a car, never had a driver's license, and was driven around everywhere he went, but wanted to put roads everywhere. His efforts were stymied in this case. He still did plenty of damage other places, but
Yeah, he sure did.
in this one case, he did not prevail, and that was to the good. And Jane Jacobs was the one who really, she wrote a book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities.
That's the one I've got.
And the terminology and the title itself is interesting, because she was seeing in the 60s, in the 50s, 60s, and really through the 70s, we saw that there was a really big problem going on in our cities. And it was not a problem of pollution and of sicknesses and things, but a more pervasive and subversive kind of issue. And that had to do with how people lived and where they lived, and how they treated people of different races and ethnicities and other socioeconomic issues. And what people started to realize was that, and in our postmodern world, it's easy for us to armchair quarterback Robert Moses and say he was the devil, but he was just a product of the time. He was just trying to do what he felt was best, according to the best knowledge that he had for the city. So yeah, what he did was horrible, but he was doing it with good intent. And so the question becomes, do the ends justify the means? It's a moral question we probably can't answer in tonight's meeting. One of the things that came out in about the same time frame, Sarah, you'll recognize this. This is Euclidean zoning. We have different areas of different types of land use, okay? And it's named not after Euclid in Greece, but after Euclid in Ohio. Shout out for Ohio. I think, Sarah, you've been there, right?
That's where I served my mission in Cleveland, Ohio. I was
Awesome.
in the Euclid area.
And Euclid is just outside of Cleveland, for those of you who don't know. It's called Euclidean zoning because it's the first city in America that had their zoning laws challenged. Not this first city in America to have zoning laws. Other cities had them, but this was the first one that was challenged, and it was taken all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, absolutely, cities have a right to say what goes in which places. And basically every city in America follows this pattern. And you have one area that is your single family residential, you have a commercial area, you have multifamily, and you have industrial. And it's an easy pattern to follow. People understand it. It's I don't know, what else about this? What happened was that in 1922, the Department of Commerce came out with a model ordinance for states to adopt that was a zoning ordinance that would allow cities to zone their cities if they followed this particular pattern. And that's what happened, and this is what we're dealing with to this very day. I just put this up here. This is more of a just a linear kind of view of that, what we were just looking at. You have the urban core zone, urban center, and it transitions out towards a natural zone. The problem is, though, that in our postmodern society, we're starting to realize that there's something that's being left behind in our cities. In all of our planning efforts, we want to be clever and we want to be good and we want to do the things right. We want to put roads in so people can get around and through. We want to zone the places properly so that we don't get any unwanted uses. And there are a lot of good things about that, but there is something that's being forgotten in all of that. and that is the people. How does the city relate to the people who live there? If we zone things for people and we design streets and things for people, they look a lot different. They look a lot different than, let me go back to this. They look a lot different from this, right? In order to get from your single family detached residence over here, how do you get over to the industrial area? Well, why would you want to live there first off? But how would you get there? You have to get on this road and drive over there, right? If you wanted to, if you were in this single family residential area and you wanted to get over to, you know, buy a pizza, you'd have to go over to the commercial area. And normally that means, in our society, that means getting in your car and driving over to get a taco or a pizza or something. These guys over here, they dream about moving over to the single family residential area, but they're stuck in the multifamily residential area pretty much forever, unless they're lucky, right? In our postmodern world, we've come to realize that maybe this isn't the best. Maybe there's a more inclusive way that we could do this. And so we look at the streets. How do we get people around and through? How do we make the streets inviting? How do we make it so that they're beautiful unto themselves? How do we get back in touch with the natural world that we've kind of paved over and forgotten about? And how do we bring things down to a human scale like this? This is one of my favorite areas. This was from my mission in Korea. About 500 years ago, they developed out the city of Seoul, and they needed a drainage way to get water. Basically, there's a river that was flowing through the river, flowing through the city to another river that cuts the city in half. And this was the big drainage ditch. And for years and years and years, I mean, 100 or 200 years, this thing was covered over by pipes and buried, and no one ever knew it was even there. It just kind of went in, the storm drain went in, and it made its way out to the Han River, which is the big river in Seoul. But they have, in the last 20 or 30 years, they decided, you know what, we need to rethink this. We need to rethink how we treat this place and make it someplace that's not only more functional, but more importantly, more beautiful, because our residents in Seoul, and you can see from this picture here, this side, these are people that live in apartment buildings that are made out of concrete. They are a dozen stories tall or more, and it's a very heavily urbanized, very densely populated urban area. And they don't have, they're missing this touch of nature and of what the land is and wants to be. So they brought this stream up. It's called daylighted. They daylighted the stream and made it so that it's not only functional as a drainage. You see there's water in there. And these areas, these walk areas along either side, they will flood in the event of a flood. It's meant to contain the water. But while it's not in flood stage, which it very seldom is, people can go down here and enjoy this as a park. And you see this one is clearly late at night, and there's still people out there enjoying the water and just the connection there. They're under a bridge. The bridge has traffic moving over the top of them, but they're still down there enjoying the water and that connection to nature there. So here we are back in Pleasant View, and here's a little bit of a quiz for you. One of these pictures that I put up here is not Pleasant View, and I want to see if you can guess which one it is. Don't say the lower right because the chief will be upset.
Lower left.
Yeah, that lower left, that's actually Pleasant Grove, Utah. For some reason, it got put in with my Google search when I did Pleasant View, and I just thought it was cute that someone thought Pleasant View was Pleasant Grove. When you think about Pleasant View, what do you think about? This is a real question.
I think about Mount Ben Lomond.
Okay, so you're over in this quadrant over here.
Yeah, I think about living at the foothills of the mountain, and anywhere you live in Pleasant View, you're basically at the foothills of the mountain. Anywhere.
That's
right?
true. Yeah.
However, we're never in the shadow of the lawmakers.
Who else has got thoughts? I'm not going to pick that scab. Who else has got thoughts?
I think it's a beautiful, everywhere you look, it's just so pretty. I think also kind folk, just kind folk.
Super nice people.
I mean, everybody waves at each other. You just have to wave. It's so nice. It's just a friendly place, just not overly friendly, just, pleasant. Just
It's pleasant.
green.
I think of it
Pretty.
as being more intimate. It just feels a little quieter, a little more connected.
It feels like home, doesn't it?
Yeah, it
It
does.
Do you think this picture here on the upper right, that's the Cove, those apartment buildings? Do you think the people who live in the Cove feel like they live in Pleasant View? It's more of a rhetorical question.
I would think so.
I would hope so, but do you think that the people that lives, the guy that lives in this townhouse right here, do you think he feels differently about the way where he lives than this guy that lives? And Keith, you know that guy, so I'm not gonna, mention any names, but
Yeah.
How do you think their lifestyle is different? Does this guy feel more plugged into what we would call Pleasant View than the guy that lives up here in this townhouse right here?
I don't think he would feel more or less plugged in. My opinion.
It's up to the person and really their mentality of how they feel about Pleasant View and their place in it.
Well, the question isn't really necessarily one that I'm looking for an answer for. It's really one of how do we include people in Pleasant View as we're building out the city? How do we make sure people feel included? I don't live in Pleasant View, but I wish I did. That was my question from the survey. I hope you guys all took that survey on recycling. And when I think about living in Pleasant View, it's not living in a townhome though. It's living in this kind of home here. And it's smiling like the chief, although the chief does live he lives in a duplex. Whoops, wrong way. Too much wrong way. Pleasant View Park, this is one thing that I know Pleasant View does really well. We have great parks and they're great places for people to go and be together. Shady Lane in particular is just world-class park. It's the kind of experience everybody wants to have. Just to make sure we hold on to that. How about this? Does anybody recognize this?
Barn.
That's
The
the barn,
golf
huh?
course.
Mm-hmm.
How about these places? These look familiar to anybody?
Yep.
What about this one right here?
That's the new school.
That's the new school, yep.
I don't know where they got the name, but that's not my business.
What's the name?
Orchard.
Springs.
We were pushing for Pleasant View Elementary, but they decided that they wanted to avoid that, which is weird, but okay. Yeah, anyway. And then I think this is the last slide, but the idea is that there's a government connection here as well that works really well for our city. We have great city staff and employees that work well together and with other entities. That's why I put the UTA up there, because we work together with UTA. And we also have a future though that we need to focus on and make sure that we maintain. And part of that future involves not just what goes on in Pleasant View, but as a region. And again, that train represents that as well, because we're not just Pleasant View. Pleasant View is part of a much larger fabric of community. And we need to make sure that we are a part of that. We need to make sure that we're part of the planning efforts going forward with that. But we also need to make sure that we hold on to what makes Pleasant View awesome. And I started out with that. And that is our major task and role as planning commissioners and as staff. That's our job, is to make sure that Pleasant View stays awesome. So, yep, that was the last slide.
Thanks, Bill. A lot of that's why I wanted to be a planner.
Very good.
Does anyone have any questions or thoughts on any of that?
The only thing that I thought of, even while you're showing all those pictures, is we change,
We do.
we adapt. We grow older, we move out, societies change. And usually as we change, we move into the areas that have changed for us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think it's always going to be that way.
Well, and it's an iterative process. We're never where we are going to end up because we just keep moving forward. The opposite of progress is Congress, right? No, I'm kidding.
No, you're serious.
The opposite of progress is stagnation, and it's in stagnation that all of those diseases and problems and issues that we saw with the previous cities in the past, that's where they all came to be. And yeah, we're looking for a place that people want to come and live and be and raise their families, and where their families can raise their families. And yeah.
You know, when you talk though about stagnation, that stagnation is a real negative. On the other hand, you really have to have planned, thoughtful progress. Because I'm of the age, I well remember the Ogden City Mall being built in downtown Ogden at the time. That was the new way of doing things, bringing it to the center of town. And we lost everything that made Ogden really charming. It completely changed our downtown area. And I think that was in the 1980, around that time period.
Yep.
And it's been now 30 years that we are getting back to Ogden becoming a healthier downtown environment. But I mean, that took place looking for progress, the new, the greatest, the best way to do it. And they did not stagnate. They wanted to be progressive. So somewhere you've got to find that balance between not stagnating, but not being so progressive that you miss the mark.
That's a good example. I always wondered how that ever got through. When that was built, I mentioned to my wife, this is doomed for failure. It never was conducive. The parking was bad. It was just a bad idea.
I think that the easiest way to do it is to let Ogden try all of the things first, and we just won't do what they did. And
There you go.
Yeah, let's not put in a shopping mall.
No.
not anymore.
But I think that goes to show the long-term ramifications that changes can make, for good or for bad. So
Well,
it can be really positive. I mean, you look at, I think City Creek in downtown Salt Lake has ended up being a positive and keeping, at least to this point, of keeping it vibrant. But who knows in 20, 30 years, maybe people will look back and go, not a good idea. I don't know.
Well, none of us has a crystal ball, and we're all just trying to make the decisions at the time. Ogden City was a little bit late coming to the mall game, and honestly, they didn't probably get the full benefit out of it. But I lived downtown Ogden for a few months a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed it. I liked being able to walk to the movie theater and restaurants and things right from my little apartment, and it was great.
But it's taken us 30 years to get to that point.
Exactly.
They've done a lot of really good things to come back to some things that we forgot about. I think that Bill touched on a lot of things on his presentation that are going around in the city planning world right now. Is line of sight. Bob Moses, when he was planning New York City, he did it from a bird's eye view. He forgot to look at what the people were seeing from the street. what we can see from our line of sight. And we need to decorate our streets, plan our streets, build our homes, build our buildings from what we can see from the street. Not exactly, I mean, from like the 50s, 60s, we built sky rises to see what does the city look like from our cars as we're passing by. We really need to see, like, what do we see it as people see it from our eyes when we're on the street, and bring it down to a community level, to a person level, so that it's more inviting for us to be on the streets as a community. I think that's what we've been missing for the last 50 years. And I think a lot of developers and a lot of planners are trying to bring that back, so that we can have a movable chair in the you know, in a park so that we can come back together. And so I think a lot of communities are trying to bring that back. And I think that's exactly what Jane Jacobs was trying to save in Greenwich Village, so that we would have that community aspect that we've missed out on, you know, in those, you know, 30 years ago. So yeah, I think that was an awesome presentation. Thank you.
That was, you know, it's interesting that you brought that up, talking about the view. And that's so true, but we're also seeing with some certain form-based codes of buildings coming in like 2-3 stories right next to the road. Have you seen that one on 2nd Street?
Yes.
Wainscots, and you've got what, three-story apartments, and there is no room from the
Yeah.
road to these apartments. Or
My wife hates
or-
those, by the way. Every
Yeah,
time we
or-
drive by,
or
she's like,
the
I
new
hate
car wash.
those.
They're
You know,
ugly. They
North
just-
Ogden's gone through that with the new car wash that went down on Washington Boulevard. The city wanted that next to the street because they want the parking, they want the building next to the street, so that the parking's behind the building. And the citizens, as it went up, said, this isn't what we want. I mean, we're driving down a road and now we are suddenly just surrounded with all these big buildings, and they
Walls
block
of
our view, they block
concrete.
our view of the mountains and everything. So, you know, so I think that's an interesting perspective when you talk about what do you see? What are you looking at?
You want to tell her, Bill, or should I?
Why don't you, Keith?
So Julie, we're actually talking about form-based code right now. Some of us in the city like that concept. And I was really disappointed when North Ogden pulled the plug. I think there's something to having the back of the store face the highway and having the inside as an area to park and walk and shop without being next to the street. So I like the form-based code.
Well, I think on form-based code, a lot goes into what else, what specifications you have on it. If it's such that you've got a 3-story apartment building, you're going to have what they have on 2nd Street. And if you go up 2nd Street and you like that look of feeling like it's right in your face, if there's a car accident, then the car is going into the building. I mean, there's pros and cons either way. I'm just saying, you know, there are some aspects to what Alicia said, that view, that it does make a difference.
So
I feel
I
like
do agree
I don't
with
like
you.
I don't like the parking lot on next to the street either, but I feel like if you have a sidewalk that's landscaped and you have an entrance from the sidewalk to those shops, from, you know, so you have an entrance from the parking lot to the shops and you have an entrance from the sidewalk that's on the street to the shops, then that is a lot more. You can still have that line of sight. It's pretty for the streets, it's pretty for the car drivers, it's pretty for and then you also have the parking lot away from like the line of sight as you're walking. I think that is best. It's probably more expensive.
Well, and I don't really have a complaint with even form-based code if a city jumps on it at the beginning. The problem in North Ogden is you've got half the city or more developed. And so now you're getting a mishmash of some things next to the street, some things not. And it just makes it so it's not very cohesive or very attractive. I mean,
You're-
I think
you're-
if you're going to do it, you're almost better off to do it at the beginning.
You have
And
to.
at least have a uniform look versus this one is, this one isn't, and yeah.
That's why we're trying to
That's
get
my opinion.
2,700 that way.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. You can't do mishmash. That Second Street apartment is atrocious, no matter how you look at it. That's just atrocious.
I got to go look at it.
My
Oh,
wife's gonna
horrible.
die hearing about this conversation.
The farm waste code doesn't, and this is what I've learned just from reading it and looking at different examples. It works for some places, like for downtown Ogden, it works great. But if you put it closer to like with the residential, with all the apartments versus other things, it doesn't quite work.
Well, and the scale of the thing matters too. Location obviously is the most important thing, but the scale of the thing, if you try to do a whole city or a whole region in form-based code, it's going to be a nightmare. But a little area like what we're talking off of 2,700, that's a great place for it.
You know, that could be a real charming area, a place that would bring people in. So there are many positive things about form-based code, but there are things to really be careful of.
Sarah?
Yes.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I'm just raising my hand.
Oh, go,
Please
please.
speak,
Go,
Sarah.
go,
What were you pointing at, Jill? I couldn't tell.
You,
Oh, me. You're pointing down and on my screen, I'm at the top, but whatever. No, are you okay, Keith, if I just make a comment?
Please.
Okay, just, form-based code is not one form. You can make it whatever you want it to be. It's the form that matches what the intent is, kind of like the general plan. And so the form that we were looking at and have been looking at in Pleasant View was very conducive to our area. And I agree that some cities don't get it right, but I think that there was a very thoughtful process in how the form was going to look in Pleasant View, and still could, that would be complementary to our area and not feel like you're going down, with tunnel vision and things like that. And actually, it would be very attractive to, a good use of space and get you off the road and get you to, mingle around into the areas and shop and stuff and not be obstructionary. Is that a word? And whatever. So form-based code can be really good if done right. There you go. That's my 2 cents.
Well, and developers actually like form-based code. I mean,
Give some more flexibility.
yeah, they're very positive. And I've seen the negatives and the positives. If a city plans it, North Ogden, like I said, part of the issue is it's not cohesive, in my opinion.
Okay. Moving on. I think it's time to move on. Are we okay if we move on?
Yeah.
Okay. So next on the agenda would be commission communications. Anybody have anything they'd like to share? Like you'd like to see us do more of, less of? Ashley, are you still listening? I think she gave up. All right, staff communication training. Jill, Bill, anything?
Bill, do you wanna go or do you want me to? Do you have anything?
Do I have anything?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Do I have anything?
Abby just gave us a history lesson. Only
I
it's not evolution, it's adaptation.
Adaptation, there you go. Selective adaptation. I will talk to the mayor about getting us back together on a regular schedule meeting here at City Hall in a couple of weeks, just to see how he feels about it.
Thank you, that'd be nice. My opinion, it'd be nice. It's a lot more, I don't know, more beneficial to speak to each other. And to be perfectly honest with you, I am tired of Zooming. I do it like 6 hours a day, and I'm just, when I dream at night, I'm now looking at somebody through a screen.
That's funny.
It's the old
That's
Brady Bunch.
terrible. I wake up thinking, turn it off.
Hmm.
All right. If
Okay.
nobody else has anything, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Oh,
I
Jill,
do.
go ahead, please.
Okay, so I will be sending out an email that talks about conflict of interest disclosure forms. This is kind of what it looks like.
Okay.
I highly suggest you read it. If you have a business within Pleasant View or based, then you'd have to have your license. This would be something that you just sign. It's just saying that, yes, you have a business within Pleasant View, the city knows, there's, you know, with conflict of interest type things. Where we have it for the audit purposes, also for conflict of interest, so we have it on record. If you have projects that are going within Pleasant View, like not any of your architecture, if you have a development type project, okay? So things like that. You would sign that. So I suggest when I send it out to please read it. There's no, you're not gonna get in trouble if you sign it. It's just so we have it on record. That's all it is.
And really, it doesn't prohibit you from participating. It's just saying that, oh, by the way, I'm a developer, or I'm an architect, or I'm this, or I'm that.
Yeah.
You're just disclosing.
For example, if I lived in Pleasant View and I had a home business and I had my business license, I would sign this saying, yes, I'm a resident, I'm on planning commission, but I have my business within Pleasant View. That's it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Any questions there?
Can I sell cars from my business?
We will be doing this every year, so I'm gonna send this out tomorrow or tonight. And so the sooner you get this done and send it back, the better. You'll get another one in January.
You're okay with electronic signatures?
Depends on who it's from.
So,
No, if you don't have a business license and you don't have a business in Pleasant View, you have no business signing it. Correct?
So Alicia, you need to get that lemonade stand
It does
off
have to
the
be
street
notarized.
from in front of your house.
So it has to be notarized. So if you want, we do have two notaries here. They're here Monday and Wednesday, and they're there Friday. I had to think about that. But they won't be here this Monday. So, or you could go get it notarized and then bring it in. What
does
either
it
one.
have to be notarized? Oh, it does not.
It does too.
I sign COIs all the time. Oh, that's insane.
Mm.
Oh,
So Laurie pulled it from what we're gonna be audited for, also with the state and federal laws.
so
So
who's your notaries?
Laurie and Debbie,
Okay, and their hours are?
Monday and Wednesday right now, 8 to 5. Just call and see, just give them a heads up what time you're wanting to come in. And then every other Friday, which means tomorrow they'll be here.
And any notary will do. It doesn't have to be a city notary. I mean,
Correct.
okay.
Correct. It
Right.
just has to be notarized. And then just a quick reminder to, 6 months would be next month with attendance with planning commission. I totally get if you've gotta be gone, but keep it up so we don't have any issues. Okay?
Okay,
Sarah.
thank you. And on a personal, Bill and Jill, I think I thank you a lot. I think we all thank you a lot, but seriously, we know how much work you put in for our meetings, and we also know you're putting in just as much, if not more, for the city council. And we also know you're putting in just as much for city administration. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Well, I got to tell you that watching Jill grow and take to this has been the funnest thing in my career. Seriously, she has been so awesome. It just is, it's great to work with her. And then Sarah had a comment.
Sarah.
Just a heads up of city council met and last week and decided that we would move forward with a modified Founder's Day. Founder's Day committee met on Tuesday and decided what we were doing. And so there's several day virtual activities like a goose chase and a family blackout game. We are going to do a movie in the park on Friday night. And we will encourage, all of this done with with the county health guidelines and social distancing and stuff under the governor's rule of what yellow and possibly green would look like. So we'll encourage that by just painting some blocks on the grass and stuff of, it's not going to be enforced, but to encourage people to sit as family groups and stuff for the movie on Friday night. We'll still have our salutes in the morning on Saturday. And there will be food trucks and a volleyball game that you can sign up through Jeff Barlow. More of this information is coming, but we are doing fireworks. The Weber High campus will be closed, and hopefully we'll have a radio station where you can tune in and have the synchronized music. Still working on that. But these fireworks are supposed to be bigger and better than ever, so you can see them high up in the air and you don't have to be up on the field to see them.
Where are they going to be blasted from?
They're still going to be launched from the driving, on the practice field by the driving range.
Oh, okay.
But they'll be, there's certain sizes of shells that usually are typically used and have to be within the fire marshal's restrictions. But being as the population won't be congregating on the field and the parking lot and stuff, we're working with Ryan Barker to see if possibly we can up the size of the shell so
Yes.
that we can have
Yes.
some bigger show.
Kill the coronavirus.
The idea of the radio station would be
Coronavirus.
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. so-
That would keep people from having to congregate.
right.
Because the music really is what makes it all come together.
Yeah, it does. And so we're working with that. I'm
Cool.
in contact with a local gentleman and possibly Weber State, or if you guys have some connections and whatever. So we're hoping to get that tied up next week with the radio station, and the food trucks will be available all day long. So you don't have to rush there, whatever, from 10 o'clock to 9 o'clock, and there will be 6 different varieties, and we'll get the word out through email and through our newsletter and our city's Facebook page and website. So,
I have a suggestion for a great activity.
pardon?
A suggestion for a great activity.
You can suggest, we've already decided, but go ahead.
Oh, it's an easy one. Old
Okay.
man in the lounger.
What is it called?
Old man in the lounger.
What is that?
That's me in my lounger watching
No.
whatever's going on.
Watching the fireworks.
We'll do
Well,
it.
if people can do their Christmas lights synchronized to a radio station, there must be a way that you can do fireworks.
You can. It's just a matter of getting a radio station to participate. That's all.
Thank you.
Alicia
Sarah,
had
you
something.
wanted to remind me about shirts for the planning commission.
Yes, and you'll get, because we have new members on the city council and planning commission, you all get a shirt. So get Jill your sizes and what you would like to wear. Not your preference of color or whatever. We'll pick it out for you. Yay.
What color are you going to pick out for us?
You have a preference between gray, black, red, or blue,
How come we don't have purple?
or purple. I don't know.
Well,
Sarah?
this is Weber
Yes.
State country.
You will need to put a date of when you want the size by.
I need that by next Thursday.
Okay.
Will you
Next
put that in
Thursday.
your reminder, Jill, please, on your email?
Yeah, get her the sizes because I need to order those through Jones Shirts and Signs by next Friday.
Okay.
Couple questions. One, for the movie night, can the movie beat Jaws?
Oh,
It can't because you already decided. Sorry.
Oh, what's the movie?
What is the movie?
The Addams Family, the latest one last year. It's a
Okay.
cute show. It really is.
Second,
Adam's Family?
It's cute. It's a cartoon. You'll like it. It's good.
second
Get out of your
question.
mind.
No,
What are we wearing the t-shirts for? Are we not having the parade? Are we doing the parade? What are we doing? Do you need our service for anything during the day? Are we
no.
t-shirts? What are we doing? What are-
Just to wear as a, hey, and I think that I think what would be fun is if we went around and took pictures of the council and the planning commissioners and posted them on, Facebook and, and on how you're celebrating during the week, with your shirt on. Like you participated in.
Oh, we don't want to do it with our shirt off. That's for sure.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
there you go. There's my suggestion. Old man in the lounger with my
Yes,
shirt.
we'll take a picture of Keith with his shirt on in the lounger. But like, the porch parade while you're doing your goose chase and stuff, if we take your picture and put it out as a show of support with your city leaders and, appointed officials and stuff of, hey, we're all in this together. We're a team, we're a community. So that's why. And
I like it.
so
Who's taking our pictures and when are they taking our pictures?
I'll take your picture whenever you want me to that week or on that day.
Do we have your phone number to call you and say, hey, come take our picture now?
Sure. Bill can give it out. I'll let him.
Okay.
And Bill can
Okay,
give
what's
it
your
out.
phone number?
It's
Oh, you
listed.
want, okay.
I would, why don't you
It
call
is
the
posted
city?
on the website. It's not a secret. It's 801-737-0523. You can text or call.
Let's
That's
wrap this up.
I'm ready.
Make a
I'm sorry, I
motion
didn't get the rest of your
to
number. 23.
0523.
Okay, we are adjourning. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, Sarah.
Be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jill, Bill, Sarah,
Good job, you guys.
Oh.
That was a good presentation, Bill.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, see you in person next week.